Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and start with our training today. Thanks for joining us. Demystifying the Office Recipient Rights. We're really excited to be able to present this to you. It's going to be better training if you're interactive and ask questions. We are recording this session today, and I've already started the recording. I'm Vicki Suter. I'm the Director of Rights and Advocacy, and our trainer today is Jean, and Jean will introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Demystifying the ORR. All right, a lot of people always have a lot of questions about what the ORR does and how we do things. And so this is the first of 2 webinars we're doing. This is going to provide you with an overview. And the next one is going to talk about the investigation process when a complaint is filed. So as Vicki indicated, I'm Jean Fettner. I am the manager of the Office of Recipient Rights here at OCHN, and I've been in this job for a little over 5 years. Doesn't seem that long, but it's amazing how time flies. And so I've got lots of experience with rights. I've been in rights and doing rights for over 25 years, and just been the manager of rights, like I said, for about 5 years. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to share a PowerPoint slide. And in that PowerPoint slide, there's going to be opportunities to ask questions in that. I'm going to ask that you remain muted so that we don't get a lot of background effect. But if you understand the way Teams works, you'll see a little reactions button where you can put your hand up. You can always click on the chat button and type in, and Vicki's going to be my chat monitor. And you can always comment that way. And then I will stop every once in a while and give people the opportunity to ask questions. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And everybody should have Demystifying the ORR in front of them. So Vicki's nodding, so I'm assuming that that's working well. Fabulous. So basically, what we're going to be talking about today is an ORR overview. Now, this overview is specifically geared towards individuals that receive services through OCHN and their family and friends. Right? I do all different kinds of trainings for people, but this one is for people that we serve and the people that support them. That could include staff too, all right? But it's designed for you. And so think about it. I tried to think about it from your perspective. And obviously, if you have any questions, I am here to answer them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off talking about what the ORR is, and then what we're supposed to be doing, and then how you, as somebody who receives services from OCHN, can interface with us, all right, and work with us. So let's get started. So first of all, the Office of the Recipient Rights, the ORR, all right, is actually required by law, all right? It is established by the Michigan Mental Health Code. And it says that we have to operate the Office of Recipient Rights. And the Mental Health Code and the administrative rules, which is basically just an interpretation of the law for those of us who are not lawyers, right? It basically specifies pretty succinctly, pretty specifically about how the ORR is supposed to operate. And so we have a very process-driven approach. We know what we're supposed to do, and we know how we're supposed to do it, and that's what we do, right? So this comes to us from the law down. We have an oversight. The people that are sort of in charge of offices of recipient rights, all right, are up in Lansing at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. They have a master ORR team up there, and they're in charge of all the ORR teams that operate within the state of Michigan, all right? And Ramir Postima is their director up there. So we respond to them, but also Vicki, as our fearless leader and the director of rights and advocacy, she reports directly to Dana Lazenby when it comes to ORR things, right? So that way we don't have too many people that are doing oversight, right? So that we can do our jobs and do it the way we're supposed to be doing it, right? Now, I'm the manager of the ORR, and so I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the rights department. So every once in a while, I'm going to ask Vicki if she has anything that she would like to expand on. So Vicki, here's your first opportunity.
Not so far. I was trying to get
Okay.
somebody a link to the training.
All right, fabulous. So I'm so glad that she's here doing that. So this is our ORR team. We are located within the main building of Oakland Community Health Network, and we have a 16-member team, right? So there's Vicki and myself, all right? And then we've got 10 people who are called rights specialists. One of them is a team lead, and she is an individual who helps me out with administrative functions also. So these rights specialists are the people that do investigations and that go out into the community and do all kinds of neat things that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. Then we also have 5 wonderful people who are support specialists. Tiffany and Andrea, they are our primary people. They process a lot of documents and make sure, you know, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and getting things out to people. So you'll be, if you file a complaint, you'll be getting things in envelopes from them. And Nancy, she provides background verifications because we do background checks to see if somebody has a substantiation. Okay, in other words, they have somebody said that they did something and we found that they actually did it. And then we have Fran, who does incident reports, and we always have a co-op student or an intern. So it's a 16-member team, and together we're responsible for the operation of the ORR the way it's supposed to be operated according to what Lansing and the law says. Okay? So here's our first group question. So remember, you can unmute yourself and respond, or you can put it in chat, all right? So what do you think is the primary responsibility or function of the Office of Recipient Rights? So we do a lot of different things, right? So what do you think is the primary, the most important thing that we do? So I'm going to give you a minute to unmute and comment or put it in chat. And with online learning and these webinars, I've learned you have to give people time to type, right? So I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let Vicki monitor what comes in chat.
Angel says, investigate if a person we served rights were violated.
Okay. Yep. That's certainly one of our functions.
Look, I got somebody else typing. So far, so any other thoughts? You can unmute or put in the chat. Got Jordan typing. Investigate cases of neglect and abuse. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Got one more person typing. Cynthia says, investigate and ensuring rights are upheld.
Okay. So those are all very, very accurate. And all 3 of those individuals focused in on our investigative function. And that is truly one of the functions that the ORR has. All right. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, we've got one more.
Got one more.
Protect
Okay,
the
ahead.
rights of individuals and ensure they are being treated appropriately.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. So we're also advocates and we do advocacy. Right. So those are part of the things that our rights specialists do. They do investigate. We are advocates. All right. But our rights specialists do a lot of different things besides just investigations. All right. So here's a little bit of detail about those 10 people who are rights specialists. All right. They get lots of training from MDHHS up in Lansing. All right. They have to go to 2 3-day trainings to learn how to do their job. and then they have to do continuing education throughout the year. Now, the way we operate our ORR in Oakland County is a little bit different than how many of the ORRs operate around the state. All right. So every CMH has an ORR. So in our county, we divide the county up into territories. We think that by having a specific territory, this allows the rights specialist to get to know the people, all right, that receive services within their territory, and also get to know the providers and who operate within their territory. That way they can serve as consultants to them. They can come out and see people easily. While not everybody lives in their territory, a lot of our rights specialists do actually live in the Oakland County territory that they're responsible for rights. They look at all incident reports that come in, and we have over 20,000 incident reports that come in every year. And these folks looked at every single one of them. They complete most of the investigations, and we'll get there in a little bit. They maintain relationships with people served and the providers. They review all deaths that happen for individuals served within their territory. And they can also go out and provide training and education, all right, to individual sites or individual service sites, all right, including drop-in centers and clubhouses, but also things like group homes and our core provider agencies, just if some specific type of training is needed. So they're very busy people, all right? And all of them love their jobs. They tell me that all the time. They love being advocates on behalf of people with disabilities, all right, and people within our service system. So when we go back to what is it that ORR does, and what is it that our entire team is responsible for? All right, these are our four main functions. And obviously, advocacy and investigations were already mentioned. But we have four main functions: education, monitoring, advocacy, and investigation. So we're going to take a quick look at each one of these. All right. So education. So we are responsible for ensuring that everybody within our service system, all right, all the staff, the volunteers, the contractors, the interns, and students receive initial recipient rights training. And we work here at OCHN, we work with our training department to do that, right? And then we have online training for annual updates that people do. We conduct in-service trainings like this one. This is technically an in-service training, but we also do it for service sites. Let's say, for example, they're struggling with how to write an incident report. We can, we meaning myself or the rights specialist or Vicki, can go in and do an in-service training on any type of topic that they want to hear about that's related to rights, right? We have peer rights trainers. They educate people with disabilities within various service sites. They will come out and talk to individuals that receive services, right? And very often they'll email me afterwards and let me know what the concerns were that they heard about, right? So they'll let me know, hey, I was out at this place and I had 10 people listening to me, and this is what I heard them saying. And so we'll get a little bit of a dialogue going. So education is one of our primary responsibilities, is to make sure that people understand, one, that they have rights, and two, what that means. All right, what that means for them as a receiver of individualized services. So
can I make,
go ahead.
Oh, can I make just, or maybe you're going to get to this, but quick comment would be, you know, Jean had mentioned to make sure people are aware of their rights. And one of the major things that we're required to do, and that individuals should be getting at the time of their plan of service, and then annually, is the copy of your rights booklet. And at any time you have questions about what's in that booklet, you can certainly ask your case manager or support coordinator, and or call the rights office, and we will explain things to you. But it's a pretty good sized little booklet, and it does give you a very good summary of what your rights are. So if you haven't been getting those, ask for it.
Yep. So
Because
thank you, Vicki.
they're required to give that to you.
So moving on, our second responsibility has to do with monitoring. All right. And monitoring has a number of things that come with it. So one of the things that we, meaning OCHN, because we work with our quality management team, we visit all contracted sites each year. All right. And as part of that contracted site review, they do an ORR audit to make sure that all the staff, all right, that postings are up and that staff were trained and, all kinds of other things. So they're out there visiting, and then they report back. All right, Vicki and I get a report monthly on what they've done. One of the things that we're responsible for right now is looking at our contracted hospitals, particularly when it comes to their rights policies. So every 3 years, my team does a in-depth deep dive into hospital policies. And we look and make sure that those hospital policies are consistent with what the state requires, what the law requires, and what OCHN requires. Within the rights specialists themselves, those 10 individuals that work as part of the team, we've also set up a mechanism called friendly visits. And I ask that they go out and they visit sites in their territory. Let's say, for example, they have a autism service site within their territory, that they go out and visit that organization, particularly when there are no rights complaints going on, right? Just as a friendly outreach and say, hey, do you have any questions I can answer? Oh, it's really nice to see your place, all right? And get to know the people that get services there, going around and talking to people. So the pandemic has really put a major barrier in place, but right now we're starting to restart that process. We review all incident reports generated from our provider network. We open them, we code them, that basically means that we categorize them, all right, so that we can see what's going on out there, what's being repeated, all right, what's being repeated, what are isolating instances of things happening. And also we can open investigations off of incident reports. All right, but more on that in just a few minutes. We write death reports, all right, following the deaths. We look and make sure that there's nothing suspicious or concerning. Obviously, every death is concerning to us, all right, and every death is sad. But we look at it through rights eyes and simply say, oh, did we get an incident report on this? Did we know that what was going on with this individual? And so they look at each death that occurs within our within the OCHN system to make sure that that things look like they were at least reported. And if we have to, we will open up an investigation regarding somebody's death. So we do education and we do monitoring. The third area that we are responsible for is advocacy. So I get phone calls every single week from individuals receiving services and their families or their guardians if they have them, and friends, all right, and the provider network. They all call and they'll simply say, Jean, can I run something by you? Or I have an issue. Now, depending on who's calling me, I can either talk freely to them, because I could talk freely to you, an individual receiving services, about you, but I can't talk to you about somebody else. I can only listen. So if a family friend calls me, they can tell me things, but I can't necessarily share with them anything about you as an individual receiving services, unless they have some sort of legal right to that information. For example, they're a guardian. But I'll listen to anybody who calls. They can call and expect me to listen to them. When when we can't help people, and it does happen, I'll talk more about this in just a sec, all right? When we don't have what we call jurisdiction, right? We will assist you in finding somebody that can help you, right? It might be, another entity like Adult Protective Services or licensing, or it could be a community resource like the building inspector of at a city hall. We don't have jurisdiction over everything, but we will help you find where you need to go. We do events like this, and we do other things in conjunction with OCHN that help people understand rights and understand the importance of self-advocacy and standing up for yourself. And then we collaborate with other ORRs around the state. So very often we will get a call from somebody who lives, for example, in Macomb County or in Genesee County, right? And while we may not have jurisdiction there, we will link them up to the ORR in those counties to make sure that their complaint or their concern gets heard. So we've talked about education, monitoring, and advocacy. But when I threw out that big question, what came back to me was the thing that we are most, quote, known for, right? And that is investigations. So our specialists, the rights specialists, all right, the open jurisdictions on everything that we have jurisdiction for, and it's a covered right within the mental health code. So jurisdiction, what that means is we're not allowed to look at everything. We're only allowed to look at OCHN provided services, things that we pay for, all right, and the staff, the volunteers, the contractors, the interns or co-op students that work for those service providers, right? So if somebody wants to complain, for example, about their next door neighbor throwing cigarette butts into their backyard, we don't have jurisdiction over that because the next door neighbor is not a paid service by Oakland Community Health Network. But we can direct you to City Hall. But for example, if your case manager is rude to you, or you are not getting something that's in your individual plan of service, by gosh, there we have jurisdiction. And that's when we can open up investigations. Now, we open up investigations based on IRs, and incident reports. But we'll talk about in a minute about how we get those open. So, first of all, once we've determined that jurisdiction has been established, that we indeed can open up a complaint, right, an investigation, right, then we have a process that we follow. And that process is going to be highlighted in depth, all right, in our our September webinar that we're going to have. But basically, what an investigation entails is that we interview all parties involved, we review all evidence. And evidence could be an individual plan of service and a crisis plan. It can be a policy, a procedure, a guideline. It could be progress notes, anything that will give us insight into what actually happened. So we're getting information from a variety of places, including the person that filed the complaint. So if that's you, all right, then certainly we interview you. And the main reason for talking to everybody involved and for gathering evidence is because we have to determine what's called a preponderance. It's in yellow there on the slide. And that preponderance means that that when weighed, all the evidence is weighed, all right, it looks like something did indeed happen, which means substantiated, or did not happen, not substantiated. right? But I'm going to bring something forward from one of the last slides. Just because we sometimes cannot substantiate something, does not mean that we believe anybody is lying, right? It simply means that the evidence is simply not there. And I will talk more about that in a little bit. Then we write reports, and we send the report out to whoever's in charge of that staff person, and they have to tell us what they're going to do with that staff person. Because we are not that staff person's employer, we don't get to say what's going to happen. Their employer tells us what's going to happen. And then we take that information and put it in a summary report. So that's an investigation in a nutshell. I know I went through it very quickly, right? But investigations can take up to 90 days. So the ORR does not provide crisis intervention. We don't look into something immediately when it happened. Now, if it's abuse or neglect, we will start our investigations immediately, but we will also make sure that Adult Protective Service is involved or licensing is involved. But we are not a crisis intervention team. And sometimes people get a little upset about that we can't make things happen now, all right? But we work closely with other departments, such as customer service, right, to help solve a problem. So very often, individuals that are pursuing a complaint with the ORR also are working with customer service, all right, on getting issues resolved. Okay, and we're looking back to say, did anybody do anything wrong? Right? There's a difference there. So we do education, monitoring, advocacy, and investigations. Those are our primary responsibilities that we have within OCHN. So before I go on, are there any general questions? Or the question here is, what do you think is the primary complaint that is filed with the ORR? So if I were to look at all complaints that we get from an entire year, which is 800 plus, all right, what do you think is the thing that people are complaining about the most? Or do you have any questions about what I just covered? So Vicki, I'm going to leave this to you at this point.
Great. Let's, any questions? Anybody got questions? Something that Jean shared that you thought, I'm not sure what that means, or what about this issue?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, this is Jose from the Pontiac side. I don't have a question, maybe a question, yes. I wonder if the mayor complaint that is received to you guys is availability of clinicians or staff to be able, or doctors to be able to give them appointments sooner than a month or so when the individual misses an appointment.
Vicki, you want to take a stab at that one, or you want me to?
So what I'm hearing is your question is, can people file a complaint?
No, has people been presenting complaints in regards to that, like appointments not being available in that matter?
Yep, Jean, why don't you go ahead and take that one?
Okay, all right. So this what I understand you're asking is, can we make appointments happen or something like that? The answer is no. Customer service can help with that. But what we can do is we can look at whether or not people were timely in their response to scheduling appointments or scheduling work with their clinician. Or we have very often people contact us and say, well, nobody is calling me and nobody's calling me to get an appointment. All right, with my case manager or my therapist. All right. And vice versa. We get people that tell us, well, so-and-so's not calling us, period. All right. So we do look into things like that, yes. The other part of what I think I heard you say was has to do with access to clinicians and doctors, all right? We have access to interview anybody that works within the OCHN network, all right? When it comes to doctors and in the private sector, we will call and ask them, and we'll even send them a release of information if needed, all right? But they don't have to respond back to us. But we very, very often will deal with hospital staff, with private doctors, private psychiatrists. So I hope that that helped.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions before I read the answer to the question Jean's proposed? Any other questions or comments?
I got a real quick question.
Go ahead, Jordy.
Does recipient rights from OCHN investigate any abuse or neglect in hospitals in Oakland County? Or because they have their own recipient rights officer, do you kind of refer them to there?
Excellent question, Jordy. We do not investigate within the hospital system. We are responsible for reviewing their policies in that. But when it comes to actual conducting an abuse or neglect or any other type of investigation covered by the Michigan Mental Health Code, the hospital has a designated rights person to do that. What they must supply us with is a copy of their reports that they write. So that, related to OCHN covered individuals, not everything that they do, but related to OCHN covered people, we get a copy of their report, right?
Yes.
So, and they are under the jurisdiction of the state ORR. Right?
Well, actually what the law says is that for any entity that has its own rights system, the CMHSP ORR has to monitor their system to make sure it's in compliance. So all the hospitals that have a psychiatric evaluation that we contract with do have their own ORR system. And that means that our ORR here at Oakland Community Health Network has to monitor and audit them to make sure they're in compliance with all the laws and rules and regulations related to the recipient rights system and the mental health code. And as Jean mentioned, they're required by contract to send us a summary of the summary report of the investigations that they do and their annual reports. But yes, so that was a great question, Jordy. Because that can be very confusing to people sometimes.
A follow-up question is there any time where Laura gets involved? Or are you going to touch on that?
Yep, that actually, we do not conduct our investigations in isolation. Our rights specialists, when they open an investigation, connect immediately with as needed, because you don't complain. A garage door not getting fixed does not get reported to Adult Protective Services, okay? So depending on what the allegation, what the complaint is about, we work in conjunction with Protective Services and, as applicable, with licensing. So licensing has no jurisdiction over a private home, but they have jurisdiction over licensed places to live. All right. So we can, and during any investigation, there could literally be 3 people involved. OCHN's rights specialist, the licensing staff member, and the APS or Child Protective Service worker. And we try to connect together to do our work together so that people are not being bombarded about the same issue over and over again. It's just a very, I think, a much more trauma-free way to deal with investigations.
Yeah.
So I would say in the vast majority of the investigations that we do, one of those 2 entities is also involved.
Great question, Jordy. Thanks again. Anybody else have a question? or comment. All right, so we're going to go back to Jean's question. What do you think is the primary complaint that is filed with the ORR on an annual basis? So Lori put, I think you get a lot of abuse and neglect complaints. Now, more than just Lori might have a thought about this. So could other people put their ideas in chat or on mute and make your thoughts known? What do you think is the primary complaint that we get? Now, if this was Jeopardy, you might get some money, right? So let's pretend it's Jeopardy. Let's answer the question. Any other thoughts? All right, Jean, what's the answer?
Okay, well, the answer is it usually ranges between 3 different ones. One of them is neglect 3, a third category of neglect. All right, and neglect 3 can be about putting somebody at risk. So staff falling asleep while on duty. All right. The other one is dignity and respect, that staff or entities of the OCHN network were not being respectful towards individuals. And that doesn't just include swearing, it can include things like sarcasm. All right. And then we have a third category, which is called mental health services suited. All right. And that primarily has to do with whether or not individuals are getting the services that their individual plan of service, their IPAS, said they should be getting. So now abuse and neglect, there's abuse 1 and neglect 1 and abuse 2 and neglect 2. We do get those, but not quite as many as as neglect 3, putting somebody at risk.
Yeah, so the common theme between a neglect 3, which encompasses all kinds of different types of things that people are complaining about that didn't happen, and mental health suited to conditions, is that the person is not getting the services they're saying. They're not getting the services that they are supposed to. That's either in their plan of service or their crisis plan. And neglect, it means that it rises to, well, we didn't get these services and it could have caused harm. It didn't, but it could have. Yeah. Mental health services means we didn't get the service, but it doesn't necessarily going to cause harm. So the majority, if you think about those 2 categories, the majority of our complaints are about people not getting the services that they're supposed to be getting.
Thank you, Vicki, for that sum up.
Yes.
All right, so moving on. So how do you file a complaint? Well, anybody can file a complaint. All right, any family, friend, grocery store clerk, next door neighbor, anybody can file a complaint. That doesn't mean, go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say, can I ask a question? If you've ever filed a complaint, could you use the hand clapping feature or the thumbs up or something? Has anybody ever filed a complaint that's with us today? Yay, okay. I see a couple hands clapping.
Great, I love empowered people.
Good.
So anybody can file a complaint, all right? There's no wrong door. There's no wrong way to do it, all right? As long as we at the ORR know that you're filing it, all right? So it can be done in person, via phone, via email. It can be on a complaint form, on a note to the ORR. I got one on a Post-it note once, all right? It was brought back by one of our peer rights trainers from an individual who lives in a group home. And they had written out on a Post-it note, and that was brought to me. And then one of the specialists followed up with them, right? Via someone else, a staff person, family, friends, etc. And also what's not on here is the ORR itself. When we hear about things or we read about things in incident reports, we can open up a complaint under our own names, right? So that when we see something that's in an incident report that looks, and we do a little follow-up, and that's a rights violation that occurred, we will open it up with the ORR being complained.
Yeah, so just to clarify that a little bit, so people don't think we just open up investigations for whatever we feel like it. When we're reviewing the incident reports, we're required by law, if there appears to be an apparent or suspected rights violation, we have to investigate. So when we read an incident report and it says something like, you know, somebody broke their arm and they don't know how it happened, well, we're going to have to open up an investigation because there could be a suspected rights violation there, and somebody could have contributed to that individual breaking their arm. So those we really have to discern when we read those, is it a suspected or apparent rights violation? And then we have to open an investigation.
One of the things, something that Vicki just said triggered this for me. But I want to let you also know that once an investigation is open, we cannot make it go away. You can't call after the fact and say, I want to withdraw. We are obligated to investigate things that that we hear about, all right? And we cannot simply say, oh, well, okay, then we won't. So that happens occasionally where people will call and say, never mind about that. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, it's already been opened. So there's a reason for that.
Jean, I do have someone who has their hand up. Josie, did you have a
Sure.
question or a comment? Josie, if you want to unmute. Okay. Go ahead, Jean. I'm not sure what's going on there.
All righty. We'll have time at the end. You can start thinking of any questions you might have because we'll have plenty of time at the end to do Q&A. So how can you help the ORR? So you can help when you're filing a complaint. If you don't report it, or if someone doesn't report it, we won't know about it. And so we need to know what's going on. So don't be afraid, right? We know that there people don't file complaints for a variety of reasons, all right? But we need to know about it if we want whatever's going on to stop and for us to look at it. So if you can't file it, ask somebody else to file it for you. All right. Try to remember details. What was the date and time? Who was involved? What happened to you? All right. What happened to you? All right. Without that information, it's very difficult for the rights specialist to go in depth into interviews and to ask staff, well, on such and such a date, did you? Right? So very often we'll have, well, it happened sometime back in January. That is very, very challenging for a rights specialist to investigate because very often the staff people have moved on to someplace else. People's memories are not as good if we're looking at something in August that happened back in January. So try and be, very prompt when filing a complaint. If you need help, ask for it. You can get help from the ORR. Just contact us. All right. Now, what will happen is these wonderful ladies named Andrea and Tiffany, they will put you in connection with the person who's got the rights specialist who's is over your territory, your area where you live. And that person will call you back and say, hey, what happened? Tell me about it. All right. Perhaps your supports coordinator or a case manager, a family member, another trusted person can help you make a call or can help you fill out a complaint form. We talked about your rights booklets. In the center of those are complaint forms. You do not have to have a complaint form. You can call ORR. You can write it on a piece of paper. We just need to get it. All right, we need to receive it so that we can do something about it. And yes, if you're a person served, you can be anonymous. And what that basically means is, let's say, for example, we have an individual receiving services, and her name is Sue Jones. And Sue, for whatever reason, okay, does not want to have her name on the report. Can we mute everybody? Sue does not have does not want her name on the report. And what the ORR does is we simply switch it over to us being the complainant. All right, you filed the complaint and we know about it, but you are choosing to not use your name, which is within your right to do. And we will simply change it to the ORR. Now, what that happens with that, though, is that then if it's the ORR being the complainant, then you won't get a copy of the summary report. So that's the only drawback, because we have very specific individuals who get copies of reports, and we're going to talk much more in depth about that in September, right? When we talk about the investigative process. So how else can you help? During a complaint, you as the complainant, all right, or involved in a situation, you will be interviewed. Right? Certainly, if you file a complaint, if somebody else files a complaint on behalf of you, all right, you will still be interviewed. And if you are noted as a witness in somebody else's complaint, so let's say, for example, you live with Sue, our fictitious person Sue lives with Barb, and Barb has filed a complaint and said that she lives with Sue. So Sue will be contacted to say, hey, Sue, Barb said this happened. All right, do you remember, all right, what anything about what was going on that day? All right. Try to stay focused and remember details. If you choose not to be interviewed, you can say that. Doesn't matter what role you're in, if you are a witness, if it's your own complaint, but that means that your perspective will not be taken into account, all right, when we're trying to establish whether or not something happened or not. And once again, more about that when we talk about the investigative process next month, which I hope that all of you will join us for. You have to remember that the rights specialist, the person who's doing the investigation, has to follow specific protocols. Right? We do things in certain order. Sometimes we have to vary because of people's availability, right? But we interview most witnesses before we interview the person who's accused of doing something. There's just different protocols that we use. So don't be surprised at the types of questions or the way that they are worded from the rights specialist. Right? They oftentimes are trying to get at the same information in different ways, all right, so that they have the details that they need. And most of all, remember, if we do not substantiate, I've already said this once, it doesn't mean that we don't believe you. It only means that we didn't have enough evidence. And where this very often occurs is it's a he said, she said. So an individual served is in their apartment and there's a staff person there and the staff person swears and nobody else heard it. Remember, we don't take sides. We are, our charge is to establish a preponderance. Does the majority of the evidence look like it happened or it didn't? And when we have two people saying, yeah, he did, no, he didn't, we can't establish that preponderance. So anything that you can do to provide details that would help establish that preponderance is helpful, but it has to be factual, right? Because the rights office does not go in with predetermined ideas on how this is going to work itself out. We look at evidence. But just again, remember, just because it was not substantiated doesn't mean we didn't believe you. Just means that we didn't have enough evidence. So Vicki, do you have anything in follow-up that you would like to say before we go into Q&A?
Well, Jane, I think you've covered most of it. I just would encourage individuals to know their rights. And if you feel like your rights have been violated, file a complaint.
So our next webinar is on the rights investigation process in September. 1 to 2 o'clock, just like this one. You can register on the OCHN's website. So now, what kind of questions do you have? all right, about anything about rights. Right? I'm going to talk about it in September. I may give you a shorter answer.
Okay, Josie has her hand up. Go ahead, Josie. You need to unmute.
Okay, unmute.
Okay,
I was not able to make a comment earlier because I was using my desktop. Now I am on my daughter's laptop. I just want to thank the ORR department and Vicky Suter for leading the department. In my experience with ORR, I think it has gotten better and better as years go by. Because 2 years ago when I filed the complaint, that was the first time that my 2 years complaint had been found substantiated. And during those times, complainants or parents or guardians did not, and up to this time, do not need to present reports. Let's say it's a violation of the person that you serve, IPOS goals, most in particular behavior services. So that's the good thing. In the past, it was really a problem for the parents because parents are extremely busy and we have to produce reports, documents, things like that. But things has gotten better. The only concern that I have is that, yes, if let's say I have a particular complaint about a provider staff, and because you are not the employer, you do not have therefore jurisdiction on what they are going to do with the behavior specialist. That is a biggest concern because, like in my daughter's case, she has severe behavior issues, not aggression, but it's really a serious behavior issues. And I filed a complaint already for 2 years and were found substantiated. The director and manager were just giving their own staff who did not in the first place, help my daughter with her behavior issues. That's my main concern. As compared to special education, you follow the what is written under IDEA, Individual Education Act Plan, and you follow those. And we were given, when my daughter was a post high school student, we were given compensatory services. So that's the only thing that I'm concerned about ORR versus, if I file a complaint against a provider. But you're doing a great job. For years and years, I have followed and heard from my co-parents. You are really doing a great job, and you make the parents' responsibilities lighter as compared before. I thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you made some very good points. And one of those points is that we don't have jurisdiction in schools or over individualized education plans and how those are implemented. And so it can be frustrating if you have a school-aged individual in your family, trying to get action taken. The school has I forgot what the name of the process is, excuse me, but they have a dispute process that can be handled within the school system, but it's not the ORR. So thank you for giving us that example again. Any other questions?
If I pursue a grievance complaint, can I do a grievance complaint simultaneously with a recipient rights complaint?
Can you file a grievance and a recipient rights complaint at the same time?
Can I do that?
Is that what you're asking, Vicki? I'm going to refer this to you.
Yes, you can. Depending on what the situation is, our customer services will address the grievance through that process, and recipient rights will do the investigation through the rights process. So yes, you can.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Judith, she has a question. Judith, if there's something that looks like a old school microphone, if you click on that, that should open your microphone up for you. Otherwise, you can put your question in the chat and I'll be happy to read it. I am not able to unmute you. You'd have to do it yourself. So in the toolbar, there's an icon that looks like a microphone. If you click on that or type in the chat. Okay, so Judith says, my questions are, does a guardian get copies of the incident reports? And how else do we know if something has happened?
Vicki, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, not necessarily do guardians get copies of incident reports. They are intended for the rights office as well as for the provider to make us aware of any unusual incidents that occur. You could make a request of the core provider that you do get copies of that. How else do we know if something has happened? Yeah, you know, as a guardian, I'm assuming, and I know Judy, you're very active, that you're having continued conversations with your supports coordinator or the other persons that provide services to your individual. Jean, anything to add to that?
No, I think that was right. Yep. We know that there's some confusion around that sometimes. So
yeah.
can
an organization be investigated? Yes. It depends on what the complaint is. There are times when we see that an organization has a systems failure. So it really isn't fair that we would substantiate against a staff person when the organization perhaps has not put in place the appropriate mechanism for that staff to be able to do what they're supposed to do. So there are times we do substantiate against an organization or a provider. Thanks, Judy, for those questions. Those were good ones. Jordy asks, I was wondering, what is the appeal process if someone doesn't agree with the outcome of their recipient rights investigation? Another good question. Only the complainant, guardian, or individual served has a right to appeal if they disagree with that. And they can appeal based on the fact they believe the investigation isn't accurate related to policies, laws, rules, facts, or they can appeal based on the reason that they don't feel the remedial action is sufficient, or they can appeal based on that the rights investigation was not done timely. It's only those three individuals, the complainant, whoever filed the complaint, individual served, and or guardian. The staff provider are there, they do not have appeal rights. Good question. Kathy asked, do supports coordinators get copies of the incident reports from ORR? They don't necessarily get a hard copy. The way that works with our core provider agencies is in our Ochn system, all of our incident reports go in there, and each person is linked to those folks that they serve, whether it's a supports coordinator or a case manager. And once the IR is entered into the Ochn system, that person that supports them's name will pop up and they will be notified there's an incident report. Now, if you work for MORC, I don't believe it works quite that way because they're on a different system, and all of the MORC incident reports are reviewed by your rights liaison person. And so it's up to that individual then to make sure that support coordinators through MORC have that information. Did I get that right, Jean?
Yep, you did. So
Okay.
Some people have the ability to file an incident report directly into our electronic medical record called Ochn, and anybody who fills out a paper incident report, we at the ORR upload that into Ochn, so it becomes electronic. So everything ends up being in Ochn. It just has two different routes, the way of getting there. And then Vicki was exactly accurate in that Ochn is programmed to disseminate it. All right.
And then Judy has another question. I have asked organizations to see the incident reports and they say they are not entitled to, we are not entitled to see that. Judy, I would suggest you work through your case manager or supports coordinator to see those incident reports. Any other thoughts about that, Jean?
Nope, that's a good, excellent idea to go with.
Okay, let's see.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
You answered the question about who can appeal. Does the appeal go to you first, to the state?
Oh, good.
where-
Oh, the
yeah.
appeal process. Good
Oh,
question, Jordy. Thanks for
excellent.
the follow-up on that.
Yeah.
OCHN has an appeal committee, and that's called the local appeal. Well, I don't want to get that confused with due process. So it's the OCHN Appeal Committee. That committee is comprised of 3 individuals from the Recipient Rights Advisory Committee, and then 4 other individuals, and they are appointed by our board. So they are the ones that review the appeal. They make a decision to uphold or send back to reinvestigation, or so those 2 things. And then the individual, once the OCHN Appeals Committee completes their work, if they disagree with that, they do have a second level appeal, and they can appeal that to MDHHS ORR. And then it gets appealed, it goes to them, and they make a decision about whether the local appeal reviewed things correctly, or if there's an additional things need to happen. So yes, there is a very formal appeal process.
Okay, thank you.
Great follow-up question. We've had about 15 or 16 appeals this year. Typically, we get anywhere from 4 to 8, but we've had some additional ones this year, which is great. I think it's great people use their appeal rights. Any other comments or questions? We're coming on the close of our time.
Yep.
All right, any closing words, Jean?
Yes, I wanted to thank you all for being such a great audience and for asking such phenomenal questions. And remember, the ORR is there for you. You know, if you call, somebody will get back with you, and they will do their darndest to try and answer your questions. And very often, when the rights specialist get stymied, they will contact me, and then they will get back with you. All right, and so you're also welcome to call me at the ORR and talk through things, but we're always happy to hear from you. So thank you again for being here today.
We hope that you'll join us at our next session in September. And yes, a recording of this will be on our website under recorded trainings, probably within a couple weeks. Great. Thank you, everybody. So much appreciate you joining us today.
Thank
Have
you.
a great Monday. Bye-bye.